Welcome back to another Pausecast dedicated to supporting your efforts to pause during the day to recenter and help you develop inner peace. We are your hosts, Esterlee Molyneux
and Dr. Ryan Stolworthy.
Welcome.
Today we have an exceptional guest joining us. Julie Swensen is a clinician who has been practicing over 20 years, who has expertise in treating depression, anxiety, perfectionism, and ADHD. Julie, it's so great to have you here. We're excited to have you participate and be one of the presenters at the Utah Faith Summit for Mental Health.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, it's just an honor. It's been so fun to spend time with you and get to know more about your experience and expertise and these cutting edge techniques that you're discovering as well. So we just welcome you here today. And we'd love to start by just learning about you.
Well, I'm Julie Swensen. I live in Cache Valley. I became a social worker graduated in 2000 with my bachelor's from Utah State, and then 2010 with my master's from Utah State. I spent the first part of my career in the hospital setting. Let me back up a little bit. I went back to school in 2008 to get my master's degree, and I did not ever have the intention of becoming a therapist. I think just through life and gathering different experiences and things, it led me into that path. And so that was kind of the byproduct of multiple experiences along. And I opened my private practice in 2015, Peak Mental Health, and here I am. It's led me here.
And now you're in a PhD program.
Yes, started my PhD program 2 weeks ago. So that is kind of fulfilling a lifelong dream I set for myself when I was 17. At the time, I thought maybe it would be a PhD in history because that's where I started. But no, it's a PhD in social work.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
You like school.
I do. I didn't like it when I was in it the first couple times. But mental health and social work and things of that nature really do draw my attention and focus in, and I love to learn.
Now you have a very unique skill set, a lot of interests in areas that might not necessarily be something that people experience when they go to a therapist. Share some of those with us. Well,
I think each therapist kind of brings their own unique self to the table. And so, but how do I say this? Well, it started out in like a CBT-based approach, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is wonderful. And that was kind of when I was getting my master's, that's the foundations that we built upon. But I realized early on that didn't work for me. It works for a lot of people, and that's fine. But learning other techniques really opened my eyes to the reality of just how amazing we each individually are, and how our mind and body, when working together, I feel like we can obviously go much farther. And so I quickly, when I opened my private practice, I realized the skills that I had learned in school and how I had learned them, I got to a point that I could only go so far with the clients I was seeing. And so I came across a training in EMDR after a small little, we'll call it a little crisis, if you will, and wishing I could do more than I was able to do. And so I got online and I found one, and I went that next weekend and got trained in EMDR, which is fairly well known now. At the time it wasn't as well known, but you see a lot more therapists with training in it and people understanding it. While I was doing my training in EMDR, my EMDR consultant said, Julie, I think you would do really well with brain spotting. There's a training coming up. Why don't you come down to it? And so I went down to it, and with EMDR, my mind was blown. I was like, oh my gosh, body is amazing.
Just describe that a little bit for people who may not know what it is.
Thank you for asking that. So EMDR is a type of therapy where we're involving the body. It's more than just thinking and talking, but we're really connecting to the thought that you have in your mind around a particular situation, the sensation in your body. So we're accessing different areas of the brain. And with EMDR, when I was trained in it, we had to move people's eye position back and forth. And what that does is it helps you kind of tap into whatever is going on within that person at the time that's creating distress that you've kind of targeted around. Because you'll feel it. If you're upset over something, you'll feel a sensation in your body, as long as you have access to those sensations. And so learning how to work with and connect those, the thought, the sensation, the emotions around it, and helping release what's ever going on in there to really restore like a sense of freedom, agency. You can think a little bit more clearer, and your responses and reactions to life are more in alignment with how you want to show up in the world. And so that works really good for trauma. It also, for maybe just life. Not everything in life is traumatic, but it can still be somewhat difficult. And so that it works really well for situations like that. So doing my EMDR, I came back and was working on my certification when I then moved into the field of brain spotting. So I still practice EMDR, but life started changing for me a lot more as I learned brain spotting and that technique. And I still pull from these other techniques, but this is just the evolution of Julie. Other people, other therapists will evolve differently, but this has just been my evolution. Brain spotting actually came from EMDR. The developer of brain spotting, David Grand, he was an EMDR trainer, and he worked a lot with sports performance. And so I might mess the story up a little bit, but he was working with an ice skater, figure skater, an Olympian, and trying to help her with doing a big fancy move, a few loops in the air, I'm sure. And he said, and you can read this in his book, he's doing the eye movements, and he said it was like a hand or something held his hand still. And as he did that, all of this unresolved trauma came through, and then was able to clear out trauma that previously they weren't able to get to, which in the releasing of that, she was then able to do this move that she had been working so hard on. And I want to say the next day, I don't know, I can't recall for sure. And so that really became the birthplace, that moment became the birthplace of brain spotting. Because with brain spotting, we don't do the eye movements, but when I was doing the eye movements, there were times that you would see like a little skip or a subconscious reflex, if you will. And that is where it's an eye position that helps you kind of target the unresolved trauma or struggle that is within the individual. And because the body wants to move from a dysregulated state to a regulated state, and it's trying to do that, we're just kind of tapping into that field, if you will, kind of like a sliver coming, the body's trying to release it and get it out. That's a simple analogy of looking at that. We can tap into that energy and help people really understand what's going on a deeper level and release it so that they still know the events happen, but they're not activated. They still, you can think about it without going into like a fight or flight or freeze response, or like a tight chest, feeling in the gut. You just kind of want to shut down. I think we all have those experiences where we don't really understand what's going on inside of us. So this is a way that you don't really even have to know. I've had people come in and say, I don't know what's going on. I just can't feel better. And through helping teach them about how amazing their body is and their mind, it's not out to get us. It's out to help us. We just need to help you change your relationship with your mind and body. And old experiences or trauma can block us from feeling regulated or in that calm state. And also just really busy minds. We have a lot going on. And health issues, gut issues, ADHD, things like that are outside of trauma can still drive emotional dysregulation. And so through that brain spotting, and it really gives, you really can kind of step back and see how amazing, the individual is and the body is and what it wants to do. It gives you a little bit more freedom to get curious with just how amazing our mind and body can be. And so that is where I kind of was realizing most of us, at least the people I interact with, are living in a heightened state of fear, shame, dysregulation, which doesn't allow us to live in the present moment and just use our judgment and discernment and our human brain that has executive functioning skills that we can't access as well when we're in this chronic state of fight, flight, or freeze, or close to it. When we're there, there's different things going on in our bodies that our body's responding as if there really is imminent danger, or with shame, like you just really did something horrible just because the neighbor came over and your house was a mess, or what you think is a mess. Mm-hmm. And so it can, and I realize even within myself, I am living my life in a way so that I don't feel shame. And it was like, why do I want to do that? Why wouldn't I want to just feel like it's free to be me? And so everything I've done with people and the clients that come in, they know, I just feel like sometimes I'm one step ahead of you, or maybe 2 steps. But I think we become like our own guinea pig, if you will. And, this is like, we do these techniques, it's, you're like seeing change and insight come on in real time. And not all the time, because this approach isn't for everybody. But for the people that it does help, it's really cool to see, the human body and mind and healing in action. So through that, I developed a program called Neural Safety. And this is where we teach people about their brain and their body. And we teach them what living in a chronic state of fight, flight, or a freeze, like shutdown response, what that looks like. Because I think a lot of people just aren't aware. And I think of the boiling frog analogy, and I've certainly been that boiling frog. You just kind of acclimate to your environment, but you can reacclimate too. And so helping people reorient to a sense of safety within their body so that then their body can use that energy that it's been using to keep them in this heightened state of fight, flight, or freeze. Use that energy into rest, digest, these restorative processes that help keep our immune system going, our body going, and things like that. So it really is very beneficial for your relationships, for your physical health, your mental health, your spiritual well-being, to be able to notice when your brain and body are in this heightened state when there's no danger or horrible moral feeling.
So with this, it becomes almost like a medication for people, doesn't it? Where they're able to achieve like a balance or a peace or a comfort when they're in these heightened emotional states.
Mm-hmm. Julie, you've been a clinician for a number of years. What mental health challenges have you seen evolve over time, or what's presenting itself more frequently?
The challenges that I feel like people are coming in with more frequently does stem from shame. If we want to get more to the root, like we've talked about perfectionism is a symptom. Perfectionism is a symptom of a dysregulated nervous system. And when our nervous system is dysregulated, we can have different manifestations of a dysregulated nervous system. So perfectionism is not the problem. It's just letting you know that there is a problem. And seeing perfectionism, which is going to be, there's fear involved, but it might also be fear of shame. Fear of feeling this heightened sense in your body that you've done something bad, or that people might think less of you. And then all of a sudden they have this weird power over you, that your perception of what you think they're thinking of you shuts you down, or makes it so you have to do everything just perfect so they don't think less of you or judge you. When in reality, they might not even care. And so without awareness of this shame response and what it looks like for you, and understanding it, it tends to kind of take over, and maybe who you are, what goals you have for your life, take a back seat to what we think other people think of us, or these expectations, these ideas that we have in our head, or social expectations. And the thing is, our subconscious really wants to help us. This is a deeper brain response, this heightened fear and shame. It's not a logical thing. So you might think, well, I'm not afraid of that. I'm not afraid of what people think of me. Well, you need to check in with your gut and your chest, because that's going to let you know if maybe there's a part of you that is, or if your brain and body are misinterpreting social threat. Because we are hardwired to thrive in society, or in relationship, maybe not society, but we are wired for connection. Physical safety, and when we don't feel physically safe, we feel fear. And we all know about irrational fears. We kind of joke about them. The grasshopper's going to eat me type of a response, even though we know it's not going to. But we don't really talk a lot about shame, and putting shame on kind of a similar spectrum of irrational shame, all the way to extreme, like toxic shame, rejection sensitive dysphoria. It can be very debilitating. I'm staying in my house, I'm not going anywhere. And so there's a whole spectrum of how shame can manifest. And I don't feel like that gets enough awareness around that. We don't talk about it a lot. We don't know how to work with it. And so we first need to become aware of, it would be weird if anybody, just like we all have irrational fear, wouldn't that be weird if nobody had irrational fear? It would be weird if there were people out there walking on the face of this earth that didn't have irrational shame.
So Julie, I'm just thinking about what immediately comes to my mind is social media. My humble opinion, I think oftentimes social media is how we edit ourselves in life. So I have this perception, I look this way, maybe it's my house looks a certain way, my kids are all looking a particular way that I don't feel shameful about. And then when you're talking about shame and these perceptions that other people have, I'm just wondering if we're not as connected anymore because we can't edit our lives. So if I go out to the grocery store because I'm out of milk, mm-hmm. and I don't look a certain way and I feel embarrassed or shameful if I run into someone who sees that, I don't have on makeup or whatever the case may be, I'm just wondering if perhaps we're disconnecting with each other more because we don't have the opportunity to edit our lives like we would on social media. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's going to be individual to the person and where their shame manifests. So we want to put on this persona, and social media, in my humble opinion as well, does not help. We want this Pinterest lifestyle, or we can. Honestly, I like now doing this work, I look at Pinterest lifestyle and I just think anxiety. That takes a lot of work to do that. And we all know it doesn't last. It's like laundry. House gets messy again and all of that. But we can, if it triggers us, and I use the word trigger because it can be taken in many ways. But when you look at social media, and if you get like a tight feeling in your chest or a pit in your stomach, that is a great way to know that, my threat response has been activated. Because there's a part in our brain that is up here in our cortex called the cingulate cortex that's connected to the chest and gut. And I call these like the lights and sirens. We don't need lights and sirens as we're looking at social media and thinking about what we have or don't have. Lights and sirens are saved for imminent danger or the cops are coming to get me because I've done something really bad. None of this stuff is the judge. I'll tell clients, If the judge isn't going to be issuing a warrant, you probably don't need that shame response. We really want to save that for if the judge is coming, the cops are coming, I really messed up type of response. Because it distorts reality and we go myopic. And what that term means is if these were your eyeballs and you want to be able to see the big picture, kind of out to the horizon. Early settlers, they needed to look out to the horizon to see that they were safe. But in imminent danger, it serves a purpose in the right context. We go myopic, so your eyeballs are, kind of turn inward. You don't see the bigger picture. Because in imminent danger, your brain just wants you to focus on that skunk that's chasing you down the hill. Don't forget about the skunk. And we start these looping, obsessing thoughts. It's going to get you, it's going to get you, don't stop, and consider your worth or what you're going to eat for dinner. Obsessing thoughts and the lights and sirens make sense in the right context. And so a great way to check that is to not give people at the grocery store that much power over you first, is to become aware. So we need intention, because there's a lot of things our brain can show us and help us with. So intention is really important to make sure that we are using our brain as we should be so it can support us. Just kind of like you brush your teeth, you help your teeth, they help you. Brain health. You want to see that you're not your brain, you have a brain. And we want to teach people how to work with their brain. So we first have to help people understand how to go inside and get curious so you can see what's going on. And we don't want to give the people at the grocery store that much power. Or the neighbor you think is judging you or whatever, because you don't know. So, or maybe you do know. Then you really don't want to give them that much power. But you want to first, okay, brain, and I'll talk to myself. What's going on in here? And create more awareness where there's no right or wrong. You really want to be able to be authentic with how you feel. And why do I have my lights and sirens on? There's no imminent danger. And any thoughts that you have associated with it, you make it first more about you and your brain. So you're going to look for thoughts, sensations, am I looping, heart rate, to know that this is more of a brain circuit issue first. Unless they're coming at you with something really scary, because you want to learn how to calm your brain so that you're not in that myopic state. And that's keeping you stuck in this fight, flight, and freeze or shutdown state. And the way I view a lot of mental health stuff is misinterpretation of threat. Physical danger, fear, relational danger, shame. Shame is found in the context of relationships with yourself and with other people. So when you can kind of approach and lean into your fear and shame, you can do a lot of things. Even jump out of an airplane if you want to.
As you recently did.
Yes. And so learning how to work with these fear and shame response, because our body places priority on physical safety first and then relational safety. And when our body feels safe, it's actually in a different state. It's called a ventral vagal state. It's a calmer state where you're in the present, you're kinder, compassionate. You feel like it's safe to use your voice, like a healthy voice. You can be firm if you need to be firm. You can be assertive. You can also be kind and empathetic. You can use your voice, and you feel like you have a choice in life. We want people, I know I do, and I know other people do, you want to feel like you have a choice. And a lot of times it's this heightened threat response that takes away our ability to choose. And so as we work with it, not against it, and feel calmer, then our executive functions come more online. We can think clearly. We show up differently. Our pro-social behaviors. It's easier to think about other people and how we can show up for others in society better from a place of health, not fear or shame.
Julie, as you've been helping people for years now, what is the individual, like say for example, what are the things that you would suggest to a person that they do need therapy? that they do need help? What are the things that they're experiencing? Because I think a lot of people are powering through. They're not getting the help maybe necessary. What would you suggest to that person? Who is that person, first of all, and what would you suggest?
Well, I think that especially if you're powering through, so I'll say this for everybody, get curious. Get curious about what's going on inside of you. And if it feels too much to go inward, do it on a walk. Sometimes it's easier to do that. Or when you're talking with a friend, just say, can we have some be real moments here? Because I got this funky feeling in my stomach, and maybe it's reminding me of childhood stuff or experiences I don't even want to think about. That would be a good time to check in with a therapist. I did actually make a list of questions, because I think, how do I know? How do I know if I need therapy? How do I know if I'm living in this chronic state of fight, flight, or freeze? I mean, there's the obvious. I think a lot of us are familiar with anxiety, what that looks like, depression, or when I have chronic flashbacks of childhood experiences, or it could even be 3 days ago experiences that I can't get out of my head. So I'm going to ask these questions and see if any of these ring true to people, to yourself. We're not just looking at this like the problem in and of itself, but the intensity. These are things that we will all deal with from time to time. The intensity of it, and how, like the volume, if you will, and then how long it lasts. How long am I thinking this or doing this? And so I have 12 questions.
All right.
And so I labeled this, how do you know if you're in a fight, flight, or freeze response? And now the fight and flight, that's like that anger and aggression, and your body actually gives you energy to fight. It'll go to your hands or to your feet. And like yesterday, just for example, I'm driving home from work after my class, a little hungry, and a semi in front of me slams on its brakes. I felt the energy go to my foot as I was slamming on mine and trying to get over at the same time. And that that fight-flight response is really important, and it did the job for me before I was even consciously aware of it. And so I really want to point out, these responses make sense in the right context. That energy went to my leg to put on the brake and keep me safe. So the freeze response is more of a shutdown response or a zone out response. That might look like just in everyday terms. I notice for me, if I get overwhelmed, I want to find my way to my bed, and like the turtle that goes in the shell, and like the lights are on, nobody's home. So we'll all be in certain states like this. We're looking at the intensity. What am I telling myself when I'm in these states? And, there's nothing wrong with this. We kind of want to normalize this to some degree so that we can be authentic with ourselves to look at and say, this is going on way too long. Or people in my life, I hate them and they hate me. Maybe there's more going on inside of me that I could use even just a professional opinion on, somebody else to talk to, or I need to face my unresolved trauma, because we can only run from it for so long before it starts to impact our physical health too, not just our emotional well-being.
So just to summarize what you're saying about the fight, flight, or freeze. Fight, you're saying the energy goes to our hands or our feet, like we want to put up our dukes and protect ourselves in
our
that
heart's
way.
racing.
Heart's racing, maybe feel it in your gut, a pit in your gut. Okay, and then freeze is you literally just freeze.
Yes, and the way I understand it, and I've done my studying through Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory. And so that freeze response is actually, it's not necessarily like, oh, things are calm and shut down. There is so much energy in the system. It can't take any more, and it makes you slow down. Your body sends out endorphins to numb the pain. And so it's working even harder for you. your body is working really hard for you in those states. And so what's interesting is sometimes when people come out of this freeze or this numb state, they start to feel. And I've had people come in and say, now I'm just angry, Julie. And I'm like, yay, you're feeling.
Yeah.
And you can kind of see it go down this, we're just going to keep on going. We're going to go through this anger that you've probably been repressing and all of that to get back into where you're in more of this ventral vagal or calmer present moment state.
And then flight is you escape. Mm-hmm. Like you just want to get away, you don't want to deal with the problem. That's your coping mechanism.
Yes.
In the moment.
Procrastinate.
Procrastinate can be a freeze response too. Or procrastinate like I'm going to go to the gym instead of clean my house. Yes, I'm going to flee that way. Or California. Sometimes when I drive home, because I live at the south end of the valley, I'm like, I can tell when I'm burned out too, because I just think my brain is like putting me on a beach in San Diego. It's like, okay, I need to check in with myself. Because the state of my body is creating the stories I'm telling myself and about kind of these fantasies of, escaping. And life is great, it's fine, but I'm human. And I get overwhelmed sometimes. And so.
All right, let's hear your questions.
Okay. Remember, these all make sense. Like the fight, flight, freeze makes sense if you're being chased by a skunk or planning to rob a bank, kidnap your neighbor's grandma, totally violating the boundaries of others. Shame makes sense in the right context. So I have a few questions. This is not exhaustive. Do you now or often have looping fear, something bad's going to happen, or looping shame, I am bad, I am worthless, I'm not good enough, based thoughts when there's no imminent danger or horrible moral failing? Remember, lights and sirens. Cops are not coming to your door when the neighbor sees your messy house, remember. So that would not be a moral failing. That's number one. The looping, some people call it obsessing, ruminating. Number two, dread or anxiety felt in your chest or gut. That would be the lights or sirens. Chronic pain can also be evidence of my circuits are working way too hard for me. Now, when something happens, does it take you longer than 10 to 20 minutes, roughly, to bounce back after getting upset? Unmet expectations, things of that nature. Beating yourself up over things that are not horrible moral failings. We do have a tendency, if we beat ourselves up, we can at times verbally beat other people up, and physically too. Some people will internalize their emotions, some people will externalize, and sometimes we do both. So it's really understanding your own personal style of how you deal with your fear and shame. So we talked about this earlier. The myopic or limited views. Are you able or unable to see the bigger picture when you get activated or upset of situations? So we'll see all or nothing thinking coming in. This might look like I come home and the house is a mess. The house is always a mess. Those are just common negative distortions. So we want to be able to see there's a lot of ways to get life right and still be on a good path. So that myopic view is one way, and it's the way that my neighbor does their yard, or that somebody that I really respect, the way they see things, that must be the right way. It doesn't always make rational sense. So that's why we want to get curious with it. So this is also a good one. Multiple tabs open in your brain at one time, or multiple trains of thought open in your brain at one time. Or if your mind was a mental stage, what's going on in there? How about struggling with prioritizing what you need to get done? When we're overwhelmed, our brain has a harder time helping us prioritize. We rely on that a lot. And so without awareness, we can, put things that we wouldn't normally prioritize. We can put work over family. Maybe my bad habit or a habit I'm trying to break, overpaying my bills. And so I will prioritize my habit that I'm trying to break over paying my bills. So struggle with prioritizing. A lot of times we can make really good plans, but following through can be difficult. So that is something that, is to be aware of. Do I struggle with following through or completing tasks? Low frustration tolerance. Quick to judge others when their choices are not limiting your agency. We do not need to be in fight or flight when somebody is doing something that is not in alignment with our values and not limiting our agency. And that's a really cool place to be. That's going to hit into your subconscious biases because it's not stored logically. I have kind of a funny example of this. I don't know if I want to share it though. I was at the gym, and I really am a lover of diversity. That's not been a problem for me. But this was cool for me. And I'm seeing this guy there covered in tattoos. He is having the time of his life. Well, he looks like he is. I was like, I want to be his friend. But what was cool about that for me is I noticed I am not in, like normally, you see a guy covered in tattoos and you think, oh, danger. Or at least that's how I was raised. Not true. But the cool part was I was calm. And I was like, just reinforcing this. So when you catch yourself doing this, reinforce to your brain, thank you. This guy looks like a lot of fun. He could have just left prison. I don't know. But he's of no danger to me. And the gym is a pretty good place to be in a good mood, So it was just a great way to challenge and be open with myself that this is pretty cool. So I'm sharing this story with you because I shared it with a client maybe the following day at the gym. She takes out her phone, shows me a picture of this guy. She's like, is this the guy you're talking about? And I was like, oh my gosh, this valley is way too small. I said, yes, that's exactly him. She's like, you're right. He is a great guy. He is a lot of fun. And he just did get out of prison. So it allows you to really just see people for people. And then it doesn't mean you have to agree with certain things, but we start to rely on these threat responses. We use them to kind of guide our decision making, and we don't want to do that. We want to strengthen our frontal lobe and our executive functioning skills, strengthen this area of the brain so that we're not relying on this response. Like, I don't need this response if I hear an obscene word that I don't like. I don't need that so I don't say the word. And if I say the word, it's not the end of the world. Judge is not going to issue a warrant, remember. So we want to really be able to use our discernment and judgment, and it just makes it easier to make mistakes and get back on the road of life. So that, I think, is a very important thing to point out. Okay, lower energy, you feel like you're going through the motions of life. Chronic people pleasing, perfectionism. Do you base your decisions or what you want for your life? Do you give more priority to what other people expect of you? Or are you making yourself a priority in what you want in your life? That's 12 things, kind of extended. But if it got you thinking more, I think that's a good thing. We want to create more awareness so that we can be intentional with how we want to use our brain to help us. So that we can, also have the byproduct of living outside of a fight, flight, freeze response. And make, healthier choices for ourselves and show up, in society better, in a healthier way for other people.
So Julie, what do we do if, some of these questions, like two that came to my mind are about the thought loops. Mm-hmm. I personally experience those on occasion. And then also you brought up, if it takes you more than 10 to 20 minutes to become regulated after a situation, sometimes we have things happen in our lives more than 20 minutes ago, more than a week or a month or a year ago. So what do we do if some of these questions are like, oh boy, this applies to me? Mm-hmm.
Great question. So I'll give you a couple answers, because above all, I feel like in this list I did not acknowledge the fact that life experiences and traumatic events, you get to decide what's traumatic to you. Your body kind of decides for you. So if you feel like this is tied to some pretty hard stuff, get help. Don't do the next step that I'm going to tell you to do necessarily. You can if you want. But we really we respect those old experiences. Your body is trying to help release those, and so if we keep shoving them down, we're just creating more problems for ourselves. So get help if you need help. Find a therapist or somebody that specializes in trauma. The other thing is sometimes we don't need a therapist. We need to learn how to work with our brain, though, and our body and listen to it. So If you want, I can guide you through just a simple exercise right now.
Yeah, let's do it.
You know, for anybody listening to this, they can pause, they can do this longer at home. But for sake of time today, we won't necessarily, because you want to really kind of take as long as you need. We want to, again, reinforce that you're not your brain, you have a brain. And it's working really hard on your behalf. I think one of the greatest gifts we can give ourselves is gaining the skills, cultivating the strength and awareness that we need to be able to check in with ourselves. We don't want to fear any sensation in our body, because if we do, we can also reinforce the fact that it's dangerous, or that this old experience you're now experiencing right now. It can feel as if you're reliving some of these old experiences. And situations in the present moment can easily trigger old experiences that you haven't addressed yet. And that is a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because now you know, oh, I got some work to do. It's a curse because it doesn't always come when you want it to. And without knowing how to work with it, it can really be very destructive. As you learn how to work with your brain, we want the front of your brain, and really your brain is always on the lookout, trying to orient to safety. So this simple exercise, we're going to work with the front of the brain, and I want to teach you a little bit about the back of the brain. Most people have never explored the back of their brain, and it really is amazing. I joke around, I call the back of my brain like my new best friend, even though I've known about it for a little while now. But drawing your attention in, and your thoughts matter. And if you ever wonder, well, who am I? You're the one observing whatever you're feeling or thinking in your body. Like if I say apple, and you see an apple in your mind's eye, if you have a mind's eye, you're the one observing the apple. You're also the intentional voice in your head. That's the way I like to look at it. You're like in your calm state, I am generating this thought, because we want to help orient our brain to safety. So I'm going to have you take a few deep breaths, and breathing into your belly. I'm going to have you draw your attention to the front of your brain, and you can even touch it if you need to touch it to draw your attention there. You'll notice your eyes will go in a particular position as you do this too, because where you look affects how you feel and how you think. And so that eye position can be really helpful if you want to come back to this later. You just kind of take a few deep breaths. Breathing into the belly, breathe out slower than you breathe in. If your brain is way too busy to do this, then you're going to want to go to the back of the brain first. But as you draw your attention there and let your brain know you are safe in this moment, you can say, I'm safe in this moment. I don't want to fear any sensations in my body. Because where your attention goes, energy flows. And so we want to draw some attention up here to orient to safety. And then, so you can stay there as long as you want. The back of the brain, it too can put our body into this, we can activate it into this threat response. And so there's something back there called the reticular activating system and the reticular formation. And sometimes I feel like I just know enough brain knowledge to be dangerous, because there's so much of it. And depending on where you look, they call it different things. So I'm giving you the best of knowledge that I have access to at this time. And I know that I will continue to learn more. But the back of the brain, it receives all of your sensory input. Most of our experiences are sensory based. The research I've read is 80% of our experiences are sensory based, our perception. And so the reticular activating system, what it does is it takes your sensory input, except for smell, doesn't receive the smell. It goes here, and then it sends it to where it needs to send it. And so it's kind of like a busy highway back there, I like to think of it. And some research would suggest that this is playing a role in attention deficit disorder too. Our reticular activating system acts like a sophisticated filter as well. And so it shows you what it thinks you want to see. And it can show you a lot of things, but it can't show you everything. And so as you learn how to work with the back of your brain, it works with you. And so once again, drawing your attention to the back of your brain and going back there with curiosity, and even some gratitude for everything it's doing for you. Might sound a little weird. You just got to try it. So as you do that, again, your eyes will go in a different position, but you might think, well, how do I do that? So here's how I break it down. Like if you were to think to if I were to say, Esterlee, can you feel the inside of your feet? Or can you sense the inside of your feet? You know, you just kind of sense.
Right?
Yeah. And like as I do that, my eyes go in this direction and I kind of get a few tingles in the inside of my feet. So just kind of taking that similar idea, but can you sense the inside of the back of your brain? So intention is really important here. This is why we need to be more intentional. Intention. I want to go to the back of my brain and just get curious with what's going on back there. And as you do that, you might notice, oh, it's pretty calm back there. Or, ugh, no, it's really busy. That's where I'll ask people, do you have a lot of thoughts? Mental tabs open? Is your mental stage busy or is it pretty crazy? Or just a little or a few, or none. It's pretty calm. Most people have a pretty busy brain back there. And so you can, at that point, just kind of notice, you can ask the back of the brain to close those mental tabs. You can ask it to help you accomplish your goals. But we do want it calmer first, because it's trying to juggle all these things it thinks you want done. And it might even be recirculating shame and fear, because that's how you've been living. When you tell yourself I'm a failure, oh, okay, I'm going to just keep showing you how you're a failure. It shows you what it thinks you want to see. And so as you let it know you want to start changing the narratives and the stories you're telling yourself about you or other people, ask it to help you with your goals. Ask it to show you how you want to show up in the world. And everybody I do this with, their experiences are a little different. And so it's beautiful because, it's just I kind of sit in awe of helping people understand, more about them and really what they bring to the world that's uniquely them. And so back of the brain, if you're like, I can't focus there, you get something cold and you go to the back of your brain. Ice pack. I was doing that before I came here today, in fact. K-Raz, help me calm down. I don't need to be in fight or flight for this. And it was great. It was great. This is just part of our human experience. So that's, something you can try at home. Put something cold on the back of your brain. I do this with my daughter. I have a daughter with Down syndrome. She gets overstimulated, has big emotions. I taught her how cool her brain and body is, and she will not let me touch the back of her head with something cold, but she'll let me rub it. And she's like, I'm sad, or she has too many thoughts she's trying to get out. Okay, let's just help your brain so it can help you think, and it's okay to be sad. And so now she'll even come to me. She'll be like, Mom, brain. She'll have me touch the back of her brain. And, we can it helps her articulate with articulation and things like that too.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your list and your tools and your knowledge. And there's a lot to think about, process. And I'm just so grateful for your time and your talents and for joining us on our podcast today. Excuse me, our Pazcast. The Pazcast.
Thank you, Julie.
Very grateful. Thank you.